Yes.
Stankowski,
Yes.
Zebro,
Yes.
and Student Rep Macy. All present.
Welcome.
Pledge of allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, item 4, I'll seek approval of the agenda.
I'll make that motion. I'll second it.
Motion by Gorman, second by Zebro. To approve the agenda. Any changes, corrections, updates? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 5A, approval of the minutes from the regular board meeting of March 16th.
Motion. I'll second it.
Motion by Bauman, second by Zebro. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Special board meeting of April 6th, the minutes, seek a motion.
Also move.
Motion by Kaiser,
I'll second.
second by Gorman. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Public forum, item 6A. Public forum provides the opportunity for the public to ask questions about or address issues included on the school board agenda. General operating rules for the public forum will be determined by me once I identify how many people wish to speak. Prior to addressing the board, please clearly state your name and address and share with the board what agenda item you are speaking to us about. Is there anybody here this evening who would like to address the board? Okay, seeing none, move on to item 7. Special presentation, recognition of the student board representative. So, Macy, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me. Happy I get to come to one this year.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been quite a year that way. So we are very appreciative of your reports that you get to do today, right after this presentation.
Right, so we're first going to do a presentation to you. And you want to take a picture, Mr.
I
Mendoza?
got it.
Oh, Brady came back.
I can.
So he's here.
Brady's much
So
better picture.
this is in recognition for your service to the children in Wisconsin Public Schools. So this is your presentation, your certificate.
3, 2, 1.
Thank you.
When you're still down.
We appreciated all of your reports the entire year.
Yes.
You have been a busy young woman
Yes, I have.
on top of being in school and dealing with the pandemic. So, thank you. And item 8 is the student board report.
So this April, we've had a pretty busy month. FCCLA kind of ended up their year. They're waiting for the national kind of results. I know that they just plan their banquets. They're doing a caterer. They usually do a potluck, so change it up a little. Student Senate, where our big focus right now is Evening of Elegance. We just got everything ordered for our gift bags on Friday. They just have a couple little items in there like flowers, crosswords, lotions, just little things. And we actually had a pretty good turnout. We had 90 participants sign up, so that was pretty good. This weekend, the musical, that's what choir's kind of been working on. They've been in the auditorium practicing for that, so that's coming up this upcoming weekend. Spring sports started yesterday, so a little later than usual, but still pretty awesome that they get to have a season.
Yep.
That's right.
I agree.
For students, we had our first student get their pilot license
That was
through the school.
That's
So
outstanding.
that's really awesome. That's Tanner Shadowski getting ready to fly.
Yep, that's right.
That is awesome.
Great program.
But other than that, most clubs are just kind of wrapping up their year, getting their end of the year banquets ready.
Thank you.
And prom,
Oh, yep, prom's coming up too.
May 15th.
Yep.
The
It's a beautiful location.
The committee is working on some special surprises for those who are going.
Oh.
So, yeah. The students hopefully will have a great time.
I bet they will. I think people would just appreciate getting to go.
I think you're right, yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Macy.
Yes.
It's in an outdoor, like a, depending on the weather, the tent sides will either be up or down.
Oh,
Okay, but they do have buildings there, so I wasn't sure if they could go inside.
Yeah, I think it's out on a, like a concrete, I've not been to that particular
It's
facility.
2 miles
but-
from my house, so
Sure.
they're working hard out there every time I drive by
Oh,
there.
really?
Really?
Nights, weekends, yeah.
We'll stop over at your house.
It looks, yeah, there you go, drinks at the Hanson's.
All right, well, thank you very much. Thanks, Macy. And it's entirely up to you. You are, you can leave if you wish to leave. You
Okay.
shouldn't feel bad if you have other things to do this evening. So, thank you. You're welcome. Item 9 is the consent agendas. I think there are a couple of items that we are going to pull out of the consent agenda. One of them is in personnel.
Correct, moving to closed.
Yep.
Staffing
The staffing portion of that, yes.
was moved out, closed.
Okay, so D.
I don't know if there's a finance piece, so.
Nothing from our committee.
No. Investment percent.
That'll be 5D then, right, Kevin, what's going?
Yes,
Correct.
5D is the discussion and possible recommendation approval of the 2021-2022 staffing as recommended by administration. And we've had preliminary discussions about it, but that's going to be moved out. Anything else? Nothing from curriculum standards. So, all right, with that one item removed, I would seek approval of the consent agendas.
I also move.
I'll second.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Gorman, second by Maple to approve the consent agendas. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Item number 10, discussion and possible decision approval of the monthly voucher list.
I will make that motion.
We have a motion by, you guys arm wrestle?
I'll second that, then based on arm wrestling, yeah.
We have a motion by Byron and a second by Hanson. Right?
Yep.
Roll call, please.
Barnes,
Yes.
Bauman,
Yes.
Gorman,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Harmony,
Yes.
Kaiser,
Yes.
Maple,
Yes.
Stankowski,
Yes.
Zebro.
Yes.
All yes.
Thank you. Item number 11, discussion and possible decision acceptance of the monthly treasurer's report.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Motion by Hanson, second by Zebro. Roll call, please.
Hanson,
Yes.
Harmony,
Yes.
Kaiser,
Yes.
Maple,
Yes.
Stankowski,
Yes.
Zebro,
Yes.
Barnes,
Yes.
Bauman,
Yes.
Gorman.
Yes.
All yes.
Thank you. Item number 12, school board superintendent communication discussion.
I have several items linked in here, and talking to Diane before the meeting, before agenda setting, I've linked in a document at number 1 from the WASB. Diane asked that I just link in a bunch of WASB notes and informations from her perspective. So what I listed there was that under number 1. All right, so when you get to that, also congratulations to all. I'll lead with this. Number 2, I have an outline for my article for the link. It's the last article for the community link that we get out to all members of the district. I'll be starting with number 2 and then leading into other items, but just congratulations to all that ran for school board, positions. I mean, of course, the ones that won, but also the ones that didn't. It speaks very well to the community as a whole to have so many people interested in serving on the school board, and I'll make sure to communicate that in a similar way in the link as one of my lead comments. Community Connection Strategic Plan Pillar. This is already done, so the Chamber of Commerce has already received. For those that sat on strategic planning, one of the pieces that was asked for from the 5th pillar, which had to do with community connections, was to engage the business community, which we have already done. So we've been actively doing it and getting active feedback through school perception surveys from our business community. So we're excited about that. There's more surveys. some that have emanated from strategic planning, including some that I'm working on tomorrow, but I'll report on that in the future.
David,
Yes.
did you know that Sue left?
Yes, I do.
Oh,
Yeah,
Sue
she
left.
called me. So, yes, related
Oh,
to
I
school
didn't know.
perception, Sue from School Perceptions, which many long-term board members know very well, she did leave for personal reasons. She talked to me at length about it. That's right, thank you. And she passed me off to Carrie, who's working with me now. She's doing great. But Sue was awesome with me with the handoff, the history. So it was good to work with her for the 2 years.
Yeah, Sue was at the very beginning, so,
Right.
yeah.
She has a lot of information. She passed it off to Carrie, and
Okay.
it's been good for me for 2 years to have somebody who was here before, with previous administration and the interim superintendent as well. The COVID vaccine clinic started a few weeks ago. I wrote this and put this to press before I called Friday off. So with the number of staff that are receiving shots, I made the decision that even if half called in ill, some of the recommendations that are out there following the second shot is in some cases, it does take a day or so to come back. I know personally, for me, I'm only speaking for myself. I struggled a little after the first shot, but we'll see on Thursday. We'll see on Thursday for me. But I think my situation was a little bit different. Maybe not, but we'll see. Everybody deals with it a little bit different. Last part is very much linked to 13A. We have Mr. Mullen here from Baird Financial, Executive Vice President. I'm probably getting that wrong. Director, sorry. Sorry.
He's been called lots of things.
He's a bigwig at Baird Financial and does a lot of big money movements for not just our district but other districts. We're happy to have him with us from Milwaukee. When we get to 13A, which is a discussion specifically, you'll see documents linked into 13A. Why am I referencing that in my documents? Because in agenda setting, we had a good discussion with Kevin and Kelly and myself and decided to push some information. You can see at the bottom over here, there's some attached presentations that I linked in there that all board members have. Now essentially, my initial thought was these are 3 different ways. This is connected to the Baird presentation if the board makes some decisions into the future. There's no decision point, only discussion with 13A tonight. But those linked documents, if you haven't taken a look at them, there's a lot of information there about pathways and processes, things for the future possibly, but definitely connected to the discussion that we're about to have in new business. So very good information, but when you look at it, I put disclaimers in there. This is not my recommendation of any of these individual companies. It was more a theoretical. I have met with these people, but it's an architect, it's a construction company, it's a single source sort of thing. So I was giving examples and for the board to have as just background information as we start talking about defeasance and 15 to $19 million and all the things we're about to jump into in 13A, which is exciting conversations for the board. It is connected to my number 5. Okay? Questions? Only other thing that I have is connected to the board or the student report was that I was asked today actually, which was great because my daughter's in FFA to speak at their end of year banquet on Sunday, which is great. I've done it before with FFAs in other districts, so it's really nice to be asked, and I'll be just introducing the start of their banquet on Sunday at 1 o'clock. So that was exciting. And also I just wanted to mention about the flight, the picture of the student Shanowski, Hannah. That was exciting, and that kind of emanated from our strategic planning work. If, Mr. Lehman and I going out to talk to the members of CWA, there were some discussions that emanated from that, including from that committee. So that was where the impetus for that came from, about that outreach to other parts of our community, connecting to curriculum pieces for the school. And it was a fun meeting to start, and it kind of grew from there. But just wanted to bring that and connect those pieces for the board, especially members that sat on strategic planning.
So, Mr. Munoz, after you do the introduction to the banquet, you're not actually Joseph in the play, are you?
No, the play, I'm going to be at the play.
Oh, okay, just making sure.
The play is Saturday night, 7 o'clock, so I'll be
Yeah,
at, yes.
I think they have 4 or 5
They have
showings.
multiple episodes. My tickets, which I did online, are 7 o'clock on Saturday night, so I'll be there for that.
Mr. Barnes.
I'm a little bit late in this. This is probably more appropriate to the consent agenda. But I want to introduce to everyone Mr. Lindsay, who my kids had for chemistry and physics. Great teacher, and he was also the assistant varsity basketball coach during one of my son's tenure with the Mosinee basketball team, who we hired tonight as our new varsity coach. So I just want to introduce him. I'm very excited to see what he does for the team in the future. And I'm sure he has stuff to grade, so he's not going to hang out, but I wanted everyone to
Nice.
be able to put a name to a face.
All right, thank you.
Congratulations, Mr. Lindsay.
You want to hear some bad stuff?
Yeah.
Well, now, let's not get the expectations too high, Megan.
Let's win a state championship.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, ma'am.
Jessica, do you have any response or any comments or questions related to Mr. Munoz and his report?
Negative. I do not at this time. Thank you.
All right, very good. All right, let's move on to item 13A then. Before I ask for the presentation, I just want to mention or follow up on what Mr. Munoz said related to those other documents that were inserted as links. When Kelly and David and I were discussing this and reviewing the agenda and the content of those materials, which I happen to have mine with me, they are definitely related to the strategic plan, but they're also related to, as Mr. Munoz alluded to, opportunities that the board could pursue.
There you go.
And we have talked about everything from facility needs to staffing size to tonight we talked about curriculum offerings and changes and additions. So I really would encourage you to review these documents because they do go hand in glove. And whether we move forward by either bringing one or more of these things through finance and building, or whether we create an ad hoc committee to explore some prospective public discussions, we need to at least be thinking about this stuff. And it's not something that 2, 3, 4 months down the road, any of us should say, well, gee, I didn't know anything about it. I mean, we have the materials, read it over, and I'm willing to add any of these things onto a formal agenda item. I just felt at the time, and Kelly agreed, that it was maybe a little premature to, and we have a very busy agenda this evening anyway, to bring all of this all at one time. But the defeasance part, I'm not saying I love defeasance now, but I loved it in the late 1990s after we had approved the referendum for our Kresge Center, and we managed to put some money into a sinking fund for many, many years that ultimately saved the taxpayers about $3 million in interest that the taxpayers didn't have to pay because we were able to pay off the bonds a full 5 years earlier. So, and at that time, and I would be interested in part of your comments if you even know, there was only one other school district in the state doing it. It was over in Kimberly. So Kimberly or Kaukauna, but I believe Kimberly. So without further ado, presentation, item 13A, the presentation of your financial review of defeasance.
Great.
Please.
Well, thank you, and thanks so much for inviting me here this evening. As was mentioned earlier, David, Michelle, and I have spent a fair amount of time discussing this defeasance, and there really are basically, two parts to this presentation. The first is your current defeasance, which in essence is something that the board has actually already decided on in theory because it was part of your budget process in 2020-21. So this is really about the execution of it. And so I think it's a good opportunity to remind the board why it was, a good decision, as you alluded to, and then also how the mechanics of it work and why it may make makes sense to consider it as you proceed into your next budget conversations. So that's the first part of the presentation. The second part of the presentation is entirely theory. It's all what if. And I want to say that just because I know when you start talking about things that are possible around the corner, this is by no means us recommending that you do these things or saying that they're set in stone and it's something that the board has decided already. It's just an example of what this defeasance can provide to you for flexibility.
And
So,
part of the theoretical, I will jump right in there, which is why I really think it's good that the only person we have from the outside here is Baird, is I was pushing hard with Steve and with Michelle with these other, we had the meeting here, all those presentations that are linked in. We were putting a lot of work so that we had this theoretical information, so then and the actual, we had these documents. So then we were trying to get as much information for you as possible to kind of be able to understand possible pathways.
yeah, and that's a great point. So let's just start with the first page here, which is the defeasance of transaction date June 2nd, 2021, which is when we would suggest that we actually execute the defeasance. So back in October when you approved your budget, you included an additional $600,000 in Fund 39 for debt service to what your scheduled debt service payments were. So your scheduled debt service payments, I believe, were in the neighborhood of about $1.6 million. You added an additional $600,000 to that to levy $2.2 million for debt service. You did that basically for three reasons. The most important reason was tax rate management, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. The second was to reduce your debt burden, and the third was to provide interest savings to the school district. So with revenue limits as they're presently constructed in the state of Wisconsin, unfortunately, most of your revenue limit is spoken for operations. The state basically dictates what you get. They tell you what you have for state aid, and the balance is what is put on the local property tax. You can't, as a board, decide to add $1 million for future maintenance above and beyond what that number is. The state doesn't give you that flexibility. You can increase your debt service payment for scheduled debt in Fund 39, for example, and that's what you decided to do, as opposed to adding for maintenance, for example. The reason that you did that is you looked at your tax rate and you recognized that it had precipitously continued to decrease. And you recognize that that is potentially a problem, knowing that you have projects and needs in the future, whether they're operational or maintenance needs. So to allow your tax rate to go down, knowing that it would have to whipsaw up in the future, is just not prudent in your opinion. And that's what you decided with the defeasance. So you decided that you would like to keep your debt service level at basically the tax rate that it was the prior year. So your tax rate year over year, 2019-20 to 2020-21, remains stable at $8.67, which I might add is below the state average.
Yeah. And when I mentioned to the board and Michelle mentioned to the board, I know that I used the word for sure. I don't know if Michelle probably did use a different word. I called it the porpoising piece.
Yes. All right.
So when I was mentioning that was layman. I'm not at this position, or I don't work for Baird. But from my perspective, what's being explained is avoiding that porpoising piece.
Yeah. We call it bouncing around. That's the
Right.
technical term. No, I'm
Right.
just kidding. But you're right. I mean, then that's what you want to avoid. You want, to have the expectation that, there's not going to be, that your taxpayers get comfortable at an abnormally low rate when you know that there are needs on the horizon, and it bounces up and down and then comes back up. When you have an ability to plan for that, maintain a level tax rate so that the burden doesn't come swinging back in their laps down the road, is prudent. So that's the first reason. So you added $600,000 to your levy. With that $600,000, you're going to create an escrow. You're going to take that money and you're going to put it in the hands of an escrow agent. It goes out of the district's hands in control, and it responsible for paying the debt when it comes due. So it's no longer on your books, it's the fees. Now, why can't you just turn around and, you know, if you've got $1 million of debt outstanding, levy an additional $600,000 and pay it down to $400,000? If the bonds were callable tomorrow, you could do that. It's very common with municipal bonds to give the investor that buys your bonds at low municipal tax exempt rates protection for a period of years. Usually it's around 8 years where those bonds are not callable. So your bonds that were issued in 2015 are not callable until April 1st of 2024. So you're putting that money in the escrow, it sits there, it pays the interest on the bonds, and then on the call date, whatever's left pays the principal. So the schedule that I put together is an estimate of what that would do for you. So on the left, your 2015 bonds that are outstanding presently, you've got roughly $4.4 million outstanding. Those bonds are callable in April 1st of 2024. And they range from 2.5% to 2.75%. And you can see the principal and interest that is scheduled for that debt service. Total debt service annually is $718,000.
So just to help board members, this debt is the elementary school referendum. So when the referendum for the elementary school passed, this is the remaining dollars for the elementary school. So, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, great, thank you, I appreciate you putting in context. So on the right-hand side is what the debt service looks like after the escrow is put in place. So we're gonna take $600,000 and we're going to put it in place. And what it's going to do is it's going to pay off as much of the last maturity as possible, and in this case, it's pretty much all of it, and a little bit of the maturity in front of it. And so it reduces your debt burden and your interest cost. And if you compare your debt service in the box that's before defeasance to your debt service, your interest payment and principal payments after defeasance, on the right, you can see what that estimate for savings is. And so you're estimated to save roughly $631,000 over the remaining life of borrowing by doing the defeasance. That's the hypothetical reduction in debt service, or think of it as savings. That's an easier way to say it.
Right.
Now, $600,000 of that was money that you levied already. The difference between 600 and 631 is the savings to the taxpayer. That's interest that the taxpayers don't have to pay. So that's savings to the taxpayer. Additionally, it takes $600,000 roughly off of your debt burden. So it accomplishes three things: manages your tax rate, reduces your interest cost, and reduces the amount of debt outstanding. So, you know, it allows you to manage that tax rate and accomplish these other two things. So with that being said, what's likely going to happen is we would, if this is the direction that the board wants to go, you've got the money in the bank, this is the reason that you levied it, we would put together the escrow, all the components of the escrow would come to the board probably at your May meeting, and then the escrow would close in June. Is it important that it closes before June 30th? Maybe. The reason that we assumed that it would close before June 30th is because when you spend that money, it cranks through the state aid formula. So the following year, you'll get aid on it. You could wait and do it after June 30th, and then it would crank through next year's aid formula. But I think it's just nice to have the continuity. You do it this year, you spend it this year, it cranks through the aid formula, and you get the aid next year.
So
And if
that's
you-
an important point. So by doing it before July 1st, we actually receive more state aid
In this current
in the
budget.
current fiscal budget.
Correct.
That's something that Michelle and I have talked about, but just so the board's aware of the multiple benefits of this May decision. There's no decision today. This is information. Thank you.
Sure. So, that is, you know, that's actually, you know, real. You've already kind of started down this path, and it's just a matter of executing the final piece of the defeasance. But I think it's a good opportunity to revisit the strategy in that plan. Next year, similarly, you could consider doing this again. And so, we put together an estimate of, you know, this is, of course, very preliminary. If you were to do this again next year.
I think you need the next page, Brady.
Thanks. We assumed that you could, in essence, do it again for $615,000, and again, you know, pay off so your debt is starting, to be paid down, and you're saving more in interest, and your tax rate is remaining steady. The following year, for example, if you maintain also may have operational needs instead of capital needs. So, if you had operational needs, that would also create that window to address operational needs if you needed them. So there are a number of ways to look at it, but it's just a way to begin planning for the future to allow you to address those needs, knowing that they're out there, and just a way to keep some of those thoughts in context.
So this is moved into the theoretical here.
Yes,
Like was
thank you.
made at the discussion at the part. So this is moving into the theoretical, but it's an important theoretical just to link to the strategic plan. I just want to come back to the fiscal responsibility aspect of the strategic plan, where we have all these 10-year needs. We've tried to prioritize the needs. We have Fund 46, but understand that Fund 46 is we're paying for Fund 46 from essentially Fund 10. So we're using the money from ourselves. It's good. It's not bad. It's very good, and we've used it successfully here. But this theoretical piece is looking at, all right, we went through the strategic plan. We have these needs. The needs are more than what we can afford in the existing district budget. These are some ideas about not having to raise any taxes, but still having the ability to complete things that are needed, roofs and improvements in the Kresge Center, or asbestos at the middle school, cafeteria at the middle school, things that we've actively talked about in our 10-year needs window, sand filter in the pool, that kind of thing. Those are big ticket items. So things that we've discussed. So just to put things that the board has regularly tussled with in that 10-year needs piece, that's the connection here.
And just one more clarification, and it's not really a clarification, I hope I don't complicate things, but one question that you might have is, well, why don't we just increase our levy at the beginning of the year for Fund 49 as opposed, for capital projects as opposed to this defeasance? Seems like this defeasance is a little bit, awkward. Well, you don't have the ability at the beginning of the year with revenue limits to just add a discretionary $600,000 for capital projects, for your capital projects fund. That flexibility doesn't exist within revenue limits. So at the end of the year, you guys have been very frugal and worked really hard to have savings at the end of the year, and there are years when you've decided to use some of that savings to go into Fund 49, but that's a decision you make after your budget is complete and spent at the end of the year. The other is a decision you can make during your budget to maintain this level tax rate. So with that, I won't lather on longer unless.
I have a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
So, any time we go out and borrow. This is, of course, I feel incrementally, it can help us with a bond rating.
Oh, yes.
The more we do it, the more dollars, as well as with greater frequency, the more the rating agencies, I think Moody's, according, I just looked, Moody's rates us. They're gonna look favorably on our district.
Yes.
We've got a pretty good rating now. Is there anything that we can do in the next, other than this, in the next 12 to 18 or 24 months to improve our rating even more, which can prospectively lower our rate if we go out to the public?
So I'm not just saying this because I'm here and it sounds like, oh, you know, you're doing all the right things and like, don't you like me if I say those things. You guys are doing the right things. So a couple of things that are like really important for you to be doing now that are proactive. Moody's likes and Standard & Poor's, there are two rating agencies that are, you know, predominant in the state. They really like the fact that a board is informed of budget and investments. So one of the questions, especially from Standard & Poor's that we receive is the board informed on your budget throughout the school year? So you don't just talk about it in October and then again in September when you're getting ready. You know, does the board get periodic information regarding where you stand with regard to your budget? Just saw it tonight, it happens at every board meeting, I assume. That's terrific. Similar with investments, does that happen? I know that that's a conversation that is occurring. So yes, check that box. Policies in order, you have an investment policy, you have fund balance policy. They really like those things. So those are things that are very much in your control. The other piece that is very much in your control, how do you manage your budget? Are you adding to fund balance? Are you having like really strange draws and adding back, not willing to make hard decisions? I've not seen that in your history. You know, so you say what you're going to do and then do what you say, and that's very important. And that shows in your year-end statements year over year. And then the last piece, and Kevin, you alluded to it, is you can manage the amount of debt that you have outstanding. So you are proactively reducing your debt profile, but it's a balance between addressing your needs and what you have outstanding for debt. So it's always that balance. And so, you know, I think you're very proactive. They also like the fact that you use a tool, a budgeting tool, that allows you as a district to forecast forward what those needs may be, and that is, you know, very encompassing. So those are good things. The things that you really can't control, which are probably about 50 to 60% of the rating process, are the local economy, who your largest taxpayers are, how that's that employment is going, what relative wealth levels are, and the median age of your constituency. Those are you just are who you are, and you know, whoever it is, your rating is who you are. Where you are with regard to access to larger metropolitan statistical areas, SMSA areas, location is just, you're here. And it's not a bad location, it's a great location. So those are things, though, as a board, you really don't have much control over, and as an administration, you don't have much control over.
Last question I have is, it references this bond anticipation note that goes up to the top there.
Sure.
Is that the money that we would utilize in the short term for such things as marketing a bond referendum?
No, no. So if you were marketing a bond referendum, you're probably using district resources
Okay.
for that. That is just a tool, and it's just a standard note.
To get into closing or whatever on your.
Yeah, so it's more like a construction note, so to speak. So depending, some school districts, and it really, in this specific situation, doesn't really apply. Some school districts might need that flexibility to get around the corner. In many markets, we feel like it gives you as a school board discretion over your timing in terms of entering the bond market. In terms of the context of this conversation, it's not all that important.
Peter, I had a question. You mentioned can't be doing defeasance when you're starting the process of your next debt cycle? So how,
I maybe you misinterpreted that.
Okay.
So your defeasance decisions are usually occurring when you're putting your budget together. So you make that decision when, in October, when you're looking at your budget, and you're saying, all right, here's our new value, this is what the state revenue limit tells us our levy is going to be. Do we want to, as a board, add more money to our levy for debt?
yeah, I thought you had said we couldn't do it if we were, like, under that theoretical 19 million. Is there a timeline where those two can't overlap?
Oh, you wouldn't necessarily do it in that year because that's yes.
Okay.
So you're going to be using, you know, that reduction in tax rate instead of adding a defeasance amount.
Yeah.
You could add new debt in that
Okay.
space. That's the difference. Thank you.
So, and part of the theoretical is shortening the bond callable date by wrapping the old debt
Mhm.
to potentially theoretical new debt.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So it shortens that.
So-
You get around that window of existing debt more
Right.
quickly.
So that you don't have the porpoising effect. So that's implied right here on the theoretical, but you can see it on the previous first slide where the bonds aren't callable till 2020,
Or
whatever it says there. So that timeline is shortened if, yeah.
It
So that
just-
timeline
you
is
get-
shortened if you wrap it with a potential theoretical new bond.
Mr. Barnes?
I might be misunderstanding, so bear with me, but that $19 million without raising taxes
Mhm.
is making the assumption that we defease roughly $600,000 each year for 3 years.
It's assuming that you are doing it this year and again next year.
2 years.
Yes.
So-
Well, really one additional year.
So my question would be, what does that $19 million, if you were to give me a rough guess, let's just be hypothetical here and say, but we need 30 million for,
Mhm.
because I don't know what the projects and what
Yeah.
we're gonna prioritize. Does patience in doing that for another 2 years, what impact does that have on that amount that we could then borrow
Yeah.
without raising taxes?
Yeah, so if you look at your existing debt service, actually, Kevin, this is perfect, if you leave it on this screen. So if you look on the left side, it says existing Fund 39 and energy efficiency levy. So that is really your debt service that is outside your revenue limit, so to speak, even though energy I don't wanna get into the detail of it.
Nope.
Energy efficiency technically is inside your revenue limit, but really walks and talks like a duck that is outside of your, so.
Got it.
It's better to put it there because that's how it behaves.
That's good.
So your current levy for debt service in 2022, that $2.2 million, 21-22, and well, really 2021 and 20. Both of those are an addition, have roughly an additional $600,000 of debt for defeasance in them. The following year, $1.5 million is kind of your raw scheduled debt service without any defeasance. And you can see that it stays there until about the year 2000, until the year 2025. You need to get out around that hump, so to speak, to really expand your debt. If you were to do that, if you were to wait until 24, 25, that $19 million number probably goes up to 24, 25. It gets you a little bit more, but not a lot more, because you still have the shelf, really $600,000 of room beginning in 26. But you're always going to be working around that.
Brady, could you blow up?
Yep.
Could you come to the last column where it has the $1.76? So this, I was just trying to do this in my head, but if we were to keep it at $1.81 rather than $1.76, I mean, that's only gonna give us another maybe 700,000 during that entire duration.
Yeah,
Right.
you could do that. So the bottleneck, back to that, where that $1.5 million is, that's your bottleneck. Again, all this technical jargon. That bottleneck is what we're trying to get around. So really in those first 3 years, that's interest alone with no principal to get us to our minimum. So that's really kind of our target. So if we got out beyond that, we probably could, that target could be wider without creating any impact.
We would have the ability, as we look at our strategic plan and identify what are all of our needs, and we could take that dollar figure or an estimate on what that would cost, and we can apply that to the system and be like, well, how long do we have to wait before we can do this? So like, that math's possible at some point.
Yes, and I think that that's really what this whole process is about. You know, you're gonna have, this number is just, you know, kind of context.
Right, yep.
And then you're gonna have a facilities plan, again, as context. You know, because that's really everything that you probably need to do, if you could. And this is, on the other side is like, this is our zero tax impact. And then it's a conversation, and I would suggest, you know, also bringing your community into the conversation, and I know you've done a good job of that always. Here's our need, here's the tax impact, you know, where's the tolerance? And you're gonna be working towards that middle, you know. And it might be zero impact, it might be for the right project, well, you know, we're willing to support $1 to have reinstate 4th grade strings, you know, whatever.
So, something also to consider as part of this and your question is to, a lot of districts, including Wasatch, just passed one and failed one. What they passed was an operational referendum, which gives them a very big amount of money if you put it over 20 years. It's actually a big win for them from an operational perspective, meaning salaries and staff. So if we have declining enrollment, which we do for another about 4 years, you know, we're roughly targeted, we showed that to the board, we're down about $250,000 just on declining enrollment every year that we need to catch up on, just based on current projections. But if things go well, we're expecting more enrollment, you know, that number would change. So that was part of our discussion that we'll have in staffing and closed. We had an inordinate drop in enrollment this year, you know, -50 overall net, which changed some of our numbers rolling forward. So part of I just wanted to bring up the operational side along with the capital, right? So if you're looking at that number, that's not necessarily built into the theoretical, but it's something for the board to make sure to have in their minds.
Yes.
Because we have operational needs, think about salaries and benefits, increasing benefits, increasing salaries. We want to pay our staff, you know, every year and offer the best environment, including benefits. We'll get to that in the next couple items. But then you have capital needs. So looking at the numbers, the 19 million piece, theoretical, also, you know, balance those pieces. I know that Michelle is working on that information and those things for the board for the May meeting as well. So more information that way.
So my question and my point there was like, I have no idea how much money the district's gonna need for whatever these things might be. My experience with this community and referendums is their tolerance for additional taxes is very low, at least in the last couple of referendums. So, like, for me, if it meant being patient for a period of time longer than 2 or 3 years to get everything you want, or get a portion of what you want, but do it 2 years from now or 3 years from now, like, that would be a conversation at some point in the future that requires us to have some idea of what the whole laundry list might be.
And that's where these documents come in, and the discussions we have to have. However, we shouldn't ignore the reality that, well, it should at least be part of our thought process. That if we could have borrowed today $19 million at 4% is going to cost a little under $8 million of interest. Whereas in today's interest rates, it's only about $3 million in interest. And we're not going to be doing this in the short term, but rates aren't always going to be this low either. So, you know, I just looked, it's like 1.7% for the municipal rate. That's what I'm talking about for 20 years. pretty good rate.
That's awesome.
165 last week. So even in a week time, it can change, 5 basis points or whatever, so.
One piece of information at the March 22nd compensation committee meeting, I know a couple board members were definitely tied into that. There was detailed information about Fund 38 and Fund 39, and it was kind of a lead right up to this. So I know some of you are shaking your heads that yeah, you remember that, and a lot of the pieces in there, it's good information. If you want me to reshare with the whole board, I obviously can. It's the compensation committee meeting from the 22nd of March. So there's detailed information about Fund 39, which is referendum debt. Just to remind everybody, Fund 39, Fund 38 is non-referendum debt. And like our non-referendum debt, like was alluded to, is the Fund, Act 32, the energy exemption.
It's
and
an
also
hour.
and also the science wing. So the science wing. So that's basically where those dollars are. That's multiple years out. There's a lot of years on that. So we're not really talking too much about Fund 38. We're really looking at Fund 39, which is referendum debt. Fund 39 referendum debt, elementary school referendum debt, kind of falling off in a few years.
Well, in true Fund 38 debt, that's not energy efficiency, it's an operational expense. So once that's paid off, it actually comes back to the district in terms of revenue available within the revenue limit, as opposed to the energy efficiency piece that actually, once it's done, it drops away and it's no longer an exemption on your revenue limit.
I loved your explanation of the Act 32. It looks like 39, but it's really 30. I forget. You said it. Walks like a duck. There was a duck involved. That was really good.
Jessica, do you have any questions?
Negative, I do not at this time, thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you for making the drive and explaining for us.
Oh, thanks so
Very
much,
helpful.
really nice to be here.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And I did just reshare that document with all the board members, the compensation committee. And I'm trying to do this.
Thank you.
Have an activity issue. I'll share it here in a moment.
Item 13B, discussion and possible decision, acceptance of statements of the Board of Canvassers from the spring election.
I will so move.
I will second.
We have a motion by Kaiser, second by Hanson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 13C, discussion and possible decision, acceptance of community foundation donation / grant.
Should approve.
I'll second it.
Motion by Barnes, second by Zebro.
Thank you.
We're excited about this grant. This came in as connected to some playground. Is that correct,
Yes,
Michelle?
yes.
So this connected to the playground at the elementary school that we're working on. And
Handicap accessible.
right, it's over 105,000 actually. This is just a piece, but altogether it's $105,000. And Steve and Michelle, so a lot of people involved in multiple grants and then donations. So together it's $105,000, which we'll be bringing to the board in the near future. We're working on a plan.
Is there a blueprint of what this would look like? Has a designer been involved?
Yep, Steve and Michelle are working on it with, just right now materials are so hard to get just based on the pandemic that right now they're on it. We're on it. We're looking at some ideas like that.
It'd be cool when you get some
Yep,
preliminary ideas on what it might look like, but
absolutely.
I would just say that the handicap park that got built in Wausau over the last several years at South Festatin Drive is incredibly popular and busy every single day. It's been very well received. I would expect the same thing here.
Yep, well, I think it'll come through finance, building and grounds, is what our intent is.
I see we have at least one advocate on their board over here, Mr. Kemmerling, who was the CEO of Mosinee Paper for many years. So, that's great. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 13D, discussion and possible decision, the approval of fee changes for 2021-2022. believe there are only two, right?
Yeah, very minor, just less, it's gonna be less for the aviation ground school, just based on going through it 1 year. It's pretty straightforward, a slight increase for written communications, I recommend.
Motion by Diane,
I'll second that.
second by Zebro.
Question,
All, yes.
the additional $25 for communication class is, do we have other, I mean, that written communication is a standard available class that we offer. Are there other classes similar to that where we have a fee for a textbook? Or,
Yes. In
Well, I
some
think this
cases.
has to go into the handbook, which is why we have to get this out early,
Yeah,
right?
these are only new changes,
Yeah.
so yes, there are
Okay.
other fees.
We have a motion second already, right, Amy?
Yes.
Any other questions? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Item 13E, discussion and possible decision, approval of elementary, middle, and high school handbooks for the 2021-2022 school year.
Usually the principals would be here, but just based on space and the presentations, I did let them leave early. The changes are mostly, the vast majority of them are teacher name changes in all the books. You can see if, I know several of you are in the document right now. And just standard changes. There's nothing major there. They're adding in, to be determined for new director of special education. Trap shooting team was added to the clubs list. That's a new thing, very popular club. I know they're out competing.
90 members of that club?
It's, yeah, that's, I hear it's a
it's
pretty big.
exploded.
It's big. Good for them.
I meant that,
boys.
I meant that seriously, but
I thought it was a pun.
No, well, I mean, take that. I mean, the one thing I would say about that team, my kids joined that team in its first year. I think Jessica's son also was involved in the first year. And there are more community members
Yeah.
who give up their time to this club with zero compensation to be out coaching these kids. I mean, there's a half a dozen coaches who do things on the weekends. They really give a tremendous amount of their time. And they started without any real connection to the school, and it's turned into a great partnership.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Zebro.
I'll second that.
Second by Hanson. Any other questions or comments?
I'd just like to thank the staff for listing the changes. I don't remember in my tenure if that was always done. It might have been a request from me, and I really appreciated that. I just don't feel like I think it's important to be able to highlight those in that way. It makes it for an easier review.
Yeah, it did, it a lot easier.
So thank you.
I'll pass that along to the principals and we'll make sure to continue that format.
Yeah, I guess on my request would be on any kind of document that we have like that. If it's something that comes to us often, that we could just get those changes, I appreciate that.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 13F, discussion and possible decision, employee benefits for the 2021-2022 school year.
Yes, so this has to do with comes from and I did ask Carla to also, she went home early with my permission, but she has been heading up the health insurance subcommittee and has been working very hard. Our new partner M3 did an excellent job out to bid, and the recommendation is the option that's in front of the board today, which I do recommend, and the administration does recommend. Projected savings are $137,551 for a better insurance plan. The HRA that was extremely unpopular is being removed, and we're recommending using a portion of the $137,551 and return to the HSAs, which is very popular with staff. At $300, $600 is listed at a cost of $85,500. So that would come off the $137,551. And then there's some other insurance pieces as well that are extremely positive. The life insurance changes, there's no additional cost to the district for this, but they're gonna allow staff to buy up at the group rate, which is pretty common in most districts, and isn't the case right now, but that is part of our renewal. Disability insurance, dental is gonna stay the same, with no increases and no changes for staff on vision and dental. Those are essentially run in a self-insured sort of way already, and everything is in great shape.
Before I go to you, Matt, just to follow up on a comment you made about the HRA.
Yes.
Michelle, I realize that everything is still in negotiations and discussion, but the post-retirement benefits compensation meeting or whatever it's called.
Yes.
There are components of the HRA that have been discussed for many, many months
Yes.
in that portion.
So
So is it that it's a different group of people who are maybe heading that up, or one's not popular for totally separate reasons?
I think it's totally separate reasons.
Okay.
I think right now the HRA issue is people are not used to dealing with it, and there's been some misunderstanding of how it's managed by the administrative company, and the file feeds from the health insurance as well.
I see.
So I think the difference is that the non-taxable benefit of an HRA is attractive, even if you had to go through some type of administrative issue with it.
Okay.
I think that's the difference.
Okay,
So,
very good.
and there are some potential, I know Michelle and I discussed it recently, is today or yesterday, there are some potential benefits that are being discussed in the Fund 73 committee that would be potential add-ons, right, Michelle? to
That is
this?
correct. That is
Okay.
correct.
We're just not there quite yet with that, but, you wanna allude on that at all?
Yeah, we're looking at restructuring the current teacher post-employment benefit and grandfathering like the top tier, having different tiers of benefits. And when you get down to, tiers 3 and 4 at the bottom, we were looking at implementing a 403B with a match. A portion of the post-employment benefit would be HRA funded, during the years, active years of service, and then 403B match, where the district would contribute to a 403B and, matching the employees' portion, their contribution, and then just even if the employee doesn't put in, but another piece that would be a 403B.
So we're not there yet
Yeah.
with that, but that has actively been discussed with this subcommittee, the Fund 73 subcommittee. That's something that's out there as a possibility, just so the board is aware.
Before I seek a motion, Barnes?
Yeah, it's my intention to make a motion, but I wanted to inform the board that I did participate in the insurance committee. I was very impressed with the staff that attended the meeting and the questions they would ask, and their goal of understanding the needs of the district as well as their own who'd be receiving that insurance. M3 struck me as an organization. That's the first I've ever worked with them, but very impressed with them and the research and the information that went out. The ideal first candidate for us was to participate in a consortium of other schools, which would have given us the best opportunity and with long-term stability, because it makes our pool much larger to compete with districts that are much larger than us. That requires a vote of that consortium to accept us as part of their consortium. We got voted off the island. They did not vote in our favor. We got put on the wait list, which is participate in our meetings, participate in their meetings for the next year and see what they're doing and communicate with them, and we can take another look at this in the future, which might absolutely be in our best interest. So that was disappointing. This became the primary best option for both the school, for the staff and for the school, especially with the savings, which is unheard of, to get better insurance and have a reduction in cost. I looked at the city and I thought about, we are budgeted for 130 some thousand additional dollars, that savings from where we were budgeted. I personally believe there's value for our staff and our ability to support them and encourage the HSA use and make them more stable in what is the most volatile thing to employees that can submarine a family is healthcare costs, and not being prepared for that. So I asked David, and before I make my motion, I'd like him to explain this. I asked David to tell me what would if we spent the additional $50,000 to be budget neutral, what that would look like in actual numbers for an HSA. So it would go up from 300, 600. And then I also like something that the city of Wausau does, which my HSA has, which is encouraging staff to contribute their own dollars to an HSA by making any additional dollars that would be above 300 and 600 be a match on this district up to whatever that cap is. So if the family HSA contribution from the district went to 900, the employee that contributes $900 through payroll withdrawal contributes 900, the district would put $900 throughout the course of the year and match up to 900, and it would be a smaller figure for a single plan. I just don't know what the numbers came out to make sense.
Yeah, I think Michelle might have some of that. We talked about it, some thresholds.
I don't have the actual dollar amount right now, what we could raise that to. I know I calculated it, but I'm sorry, I don't have it with me.
Okay.
One of the things we were looking at though is maybe the downside of that would be taking a piece. The HSA has a maximum amount, and if an employee wanted to contribute at the end of the year to, lower their tax amount, they couldn't do that if we're taking a piece of that. And then we also were concerned about stability of the amount we're spending on health costs, health insurance, and the HSA going into future years. If we wanted to, give employees something that we could end up taking away. But I will work on that number right now.
So I think 400, 800 would be in the realm of affordable, but there's some other health insurance related pieces that we're still working on for support staff.
I think that through my lens and understanding that the max on it, raising our contribution to employees by $200 isn't going to make or break them in their tax liability and their gross income. And at the end of the day, the match component is just something that I think encourages staff to do that. I'm not necessarily convinced that has to happen, but I think a key component to whatever we do with insurance, especially since there's an HSA contribution, whether it be the 300, 600, or whether it be something higher, is that we communicate to our staff that our ability to contribute to the HSA is totally dependent on what our usage of our insurance is and what our experience is over the next year, what rating we get, and how much we're able to buy insurance for them for. And that's where the value of an insurance committee to deliver that message and communications from the district to our staff come into play. And now here's something that incentivizes staff to be very judicious with their healthcare use and be as effective as possible with it. So I see a lot of upsides, and it's an opportunity for us to, the money exists there, budgeted for health insurance, and I think we have the opportunity to do something for our staff and kind of be on the high road of things, and I think it would be appreciated by our staff. So my motion would be, I'll use David's numbers. My motion would be to accept this as presented, but change the HSA from 300, 600 to 400, 800.
That is within the range.
We have a motion by Barnes.
Michelle? Oh, what is your comment?
That does fall within that range of what would be saved.
Raising it to 400, 800 falls under the 137,000.
In other words, it's affordable inside of the savings on 137,000.
I'll second.
So what you're saying, we have a second by Jankowski. What you're saying is that the increase of $100 and $200 would not eat up the $137,000 of premium savings.
That's correct.
But it will eat up the difference between the 85.5 and the 137.5.
No, not entirely.
Some of it.
Some of it.
Some of it. So 85.5 is subtracted.
You'd still have 20 20,000.
Yeah, 85.5 is subtracted from the 137. Now we're jumping into that, there's about 20 grand left if you do 400, 800.
You'd be at 117,200.
Where did the 300 and 600 originally come from?
That was in place.
When we got here, that was here.
Mhm.
Okay.
So what the recommendation from the Health Insurance Subcommittee was to return to the popular HSA. You know, they could always contribute on their own. That choice exists for staff, which is their choice to do.
And technically, this is just a projected savings from 2021, yes? We don't really have the total?
We have
No,
the
we have the
rates,
premium right here.
but,
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
no, that is correct.
So we have the rate increase of 5 3/4%. What we don't know exactly is how many, correct me if I'm wrong,
That's correct.
how many staff prospectively might decide to come onto the plan who perhaps aren't now, or maybe might become family plans versus
So-
single plans, or maybe not at all.
Michelle alluded to that in her comments.
Yep, I know.
Going to 400, 800 might increase the number of total people on the health insurance plan, which is what Kevin was saying.
And the district amount, the district cost next year for a family plan, paying 88% would be $19,000 per family plan.
Right,
So,
and from a
yes.
premium standpoint, that raises the family plan that a staff person would have to pay an additional $75 to $100 over the course of a
Correct.
year in increase in
Mhm.
premium for
Just
this.
over
That's right.
$100.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great plan, and largely thanks to the staff for having our loss ratio was much lower. So it was a substantial drop in our loss ratio. I think we were over 120% last year,
Yeah.
or something like that. I don't have the exact number. And so it was a substantial decrease in loss ratio, which is, you know, a credit to our staff.
I was gonna say, is it that, or is it because of M3, or a combination of
Both.
the two?
It's a
Okay.
combination of both.
But when your loss ratio goes from 120% to like 82,
Right.
that's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
It made us look better, but
Yes.
we do have the year before. They do look at multiple
Years, right.
and they say, okay, is that the normal, or they want to know if this is the normal. That's part of what the new company, the voting off the island thing, that's part of what they're looking at. They want to know is this normal, or
Right.
was it last year?
Yeah, right.
And that's fair. That's fair for them to ask.
So I have a question, and it's related to this last sentence down here. And it's perhaps what Diane, or maybe why Diane asked.
Correct.
I'm not sure. It says recommends a return to this benefit. So I heard you say it was there when you guys got here. But it also leads me to believe that then that went away altogether, or is it that the HSA was being funded previously and then the HRA, and now we're going back to the HSA?
The HSA was in place when we went to the high deductible plan this current year.
Okay,
Instead of the district putting everything definitely into an HSA, because once the district puts it in, it's gone. You know, it's the employee's own property. We decided to not put into the HSA and put into an HRA.
so the district was still outlaying money,
Yes,
the same amounts that are on this
more
screen
than
here.
that.
More than that.
The district.
More than that, but it also meant that it's got this vesting schedule thing, we can get some of the money back.
If the employee didn't, we would
Right.
pay as we go. So if an employee did not
Right.
need it, it was not contributed.
Yes, understood. So the wording here, a return to offering an HSA,
Yes.
is just going back to the old plan, but the dollar estimate, I mean, you're suggesting that the amounts could have been even higher than that, but they were about this because we didn't max out.
And it probably should, instead of saying offering, it should probably say contributing to an HSA.
I think, I would actually like that changed in the document itself, so that when
Okay.
people refer back to it in the future, I think it's a better
Yeah.
applicable word.
Right.
Peter?
Yeah, so my question has to do with Matt and Megan's motion. In the 400 to 800, as I researched HSAs, they do tend to lower the premiums. By going from 300, 600 to 400, 800, could that lower our premiums more? No?
No, you mean
No.
the renewal. Our
Yeah.
renewal's already, no.
It's all set. I didn't know if the renewal amount
It's a good-
is
it's a good-
based on the HSA.
It's a great question, but our renewals, we go out to bid, so then we're just showing you the best option. The health insurance subcommittee came back with this one is the preferred option. There's like 4 or 5 of them that are out there. Some of them aren't good at all. Some of them are increases of like 30%, depending on which one.
So maybe the question is, the amount that we fund towards an HSA does not affect the,
I think that's philosophical in the sense that organizations, whether public or private, which have HSAs, I know a little bit about this, organizations that make use of, for their employees of an HSA, tend to have better health among their employees because they can pay for their visits and such with pre-tax dollars, thereby lowering the future cost increases.
And I think
this
there's
could lower us in the future.
I think there's another piece linked to the strategic plan. When you're looking at the personnel aspect of the strategic plan about retaining our employees, this makes us look better
Absolutely.
to have an HSA versus not having an HSA with respect to our benefits.
It could, I was gonna say, on that line too, it could also lower costs because an employee has those dollars there. If they need to see a doctor, it's not gonna be right out of pocket. So you're kind of funding that visit.
But to be clear, and correct me if I'm wrong, the insurance and the plan and what that's gonna cost is here. It's its own,
already set.
it's its own
It's a
entity.
sunk
It's
cost.
$137,000 less than we had budgeted for.
Right.
So that $137,000, out of that, which would be like fund $10, we will contribute to an HSA per this. So those are the dollars that would be used for this, and the two are really divorced. They don't necessarily have anything to do with each other.
I'm just struggling with your motion. We have some big decisions tonight, just trying to figure out where all that plays together.
Yeah, I think it goes right to the strategic plan, is that we're looking at retaining our employees and attracting employees, and I think our benefits are absolutely something to do that.
When I see numbers like 300 and 400 and $500 and $800, whatever they are, 600 and 800, we're so used to everything being in monthly cost, right? So, but these are annual amounts. Okay? So it's not like we're contributing this monthly to them. Obviously, the amount would be $5 million if that were the case.
But just to be clear, this is a $30,000 change in the motion from the way David presented it.
That's true.
I just want,
Yes, you basically have to increase by, for the single, for both, you're talking about increasing it by, 30%? So, right, a little over 30%, the contribution into the HSA. So, I'm not dismissing the amount, the dollar amount or anything else. 30% of 85 grand is $20,000.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with 400, 800, 300, 600. We went with 300, 600 with our health insurance subcommittee. The discussions had to do with, let's get the HSA back, and let's remove the HRA. I mean, and that was part of the big picture, looking at all these options and how they came with bids. And that's how, when we were looking at all of the multiple options the health insurance subcommittee was, they were like, okay, I'm dialed into 8 and 9, the last two, because I can see HSAs coming back in those options.
Very
That
popular
was
amongst
definitely part of the discussion, is they looked at a better plan, but also the opportunities for a return to a popular item for staff.
So, truly, and at the risk of prejudicing other people on the board, I think what Peter is saying, and I feel this way as well, we've done the more than twice cost of living adjustment on comp. We have added to the stipends for COVID. We have made adjustments in the schedules of staff. I also realize that there are certain positions that we have had conflict, you know, with certain staff, for certain separate positions as it related to compensation where we froze. I get all of that. You're trying to do more than just be the treasurer, you're trying to be a good steward of taxpayer funds. So, I mean, I think that your comments are very valid, and I understand what Matt is presenting is that these were dollars that we already had budgeted for and committed to, and had already asked by virtue of approving our budget, the taxpayers at our annual meeting agreed to fund. So, all of that has to go into our decisions when we're making any kind of these decisions, whether it's about staffing or curriculum or anything else. So, all of that I think is valid. So, I appreciate the motion and second. Anybody else? Kaiser?
I appreciate, Michelle, what you've done, Matt and David, but I think what we should do is start out as said, and we can always enhance it.
And if I can echo off what Mike's saying, great this year, we don't know what's gonna look like next year, and if we increase that cost, very difficult to take it back next year without looking like.
I mean, I know as an HSA employee, like I have money contributed to my HSA, that dollar figure on how much is contributed, it is very common for that to fluctuate both up and down, depending on the next year and what the price of that insurance is, and the current state of affairs of the organization and where they're at financially and their ability to do
Now
that.
that I will agree with. We used to fully fund for our team, our entire staff. Our company maxed out their HSAs. Now, we don't contribute anything. Because we are routinely seeing 16 to 30% increases in the premium every year. 5.75 is a pretty reasonable rate. When I saw this at first, I actually reached out to Dave because I thought it was a typo. It's not common to see a 5% increase and a reduction in the deductibles. That's just, that's not a thing.
We're excited about this options, and the staff on the health insurance subcommittee are
Very
excited
excited.
about this option.
I'm great with that, I'm ready to.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the recommendation of the administration of the health insurance benefit plan with a $400 and $800, is that the right amount?
Correct.
Contribution by the district into the HSA, depending on whether it's single or family plan. Anybody?
And this is not what was proposed by the healthcare subcommittee, correct?
The committee was the 3 and the 6.
Correct.
Roger, just clarifying, thank you.
Yep, thank you, Jessica. All in favor say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
So two yeses?
Yeah, 2 yeses and the rest no.
I'll make a motion to approve as written by administration.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Hanson, second by Gorman to approve the recommendation as presented by the administration. And for clarity, to include the $300 and $600 contribution into the HSA. Any other conversation, questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Good discussion, good input, thanks Michelle.
That's very good. Thank you.
All right, item 14A, WASB report, correspondence and upcoming meetings. Kelly. Sorry, I looked at Kelly and I said Amy.
Is it because she doesn't have to?
Yeah, we talked about it before you came in.
Oh, okay.
Probably, I got one in here. What we got going on is, there is a WASB, legal and video tomorrow, update on the 21st at 12 p.m. Capital chat, April 23rd at 12 o'clock. And then there's a new, board meeting members, but we really don't need that, I don't think, unless you're interested in it. And that has certain dates, and then the fourth and final one is webinar, hiring teacher, is April 28th. And that's all I have, Kevin. So if anybody's interested interested in that, it's all in your, you got it.
Thank you. Mr. Kaiser, season 9.
There's nothing here.
There isn't.
The dog didn't need it either.
When do the next, so we just had elections in school boards all over the state. When do replacements to CISA board come into being?
Well, I would think, basically like,
July, June?
no, it's like, oh no.
Well, someone who's on maybe got defeated
Maybe you're not
and
on
isn't on
it.
CISA anymore because you can't be on CISA.
What happens
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, I realized.
Well, that was
I kinda did.
that was a question we didn't rehearse.
We got everything else.
Oh my God.
We got everything else we put time into, and you go off the script.
Anyway, when somebody gets defeated like that, the school district will name a person. that
Got it.
does that. And,
Yes.
Right. All right, very good, thank you.
That's the first time you didn't get to say the information.
I know.
That's right, exactly. All right, item 15, future agenda items. And
I think a couple of things are the finance, the continuation of defeasance, and more discussions along the lines of the Baird defeasance discussion. That's gonna be important information in May for us to continue to tangle with. You know, this was discussion only, and it was great having, you know, Baird here and our own experts here,
And I think like Kevin and I, you know, kinda addressed it, I think it's good to get the full board to see which direction we wanna head before we spend a lot.
you're talking these other things.
I'm talking, yes.
Yeah.
So that's why we kinda read it, come back with your questions, are we willing to dive into it, you know, and go from there.
So, yes, anybody else have any future agenda items? So I'm gonna comment on that in a minute. So, I would like you, I'm not advocating for anything when I make this comment. But I would like to be prepared at our next board meeting for this entire board to make a decision about whether or not, how much time we wanna spend on these additional materials, number one. Number two, do we want to send this content through finance and building? Or do we want to constitute by creating an ad hoc committee to look into future prospective building or operational needs? And I'm not suggesting that if we create an ad hoc committee, that people who aren't formally on the ad hoc committee couldn't still participate, but that we would actually have a 3 to 5 person committee that would be the starting point of something like that. That could grow into, I'm talking first board, but they could prospectively grow into community as well. So that's why I bring it up that way. So please read your materials before the next meeting. The next thing I'm wondering if we could get an update on, and it may be premature, but probably not. The impact of having gone virtual on the ACES challenges that many of our kids have faced. The adverse childhood experience.
Yep.
Survey or study, survey?
Yep, ACEs, the adverse child experiences, that's a, you know, CDC. If you look up ACEs on CDC, you'll see that in there.
You have to read that. It's disturbing.
Can we add to that, just to build on it, like, as we get toward the end of the school year, I'd be interested to see how many of our students are virtual and where we actually ended up based on previous conversations. Like, at one point, I think we were like, make your decision, you're all in or you're all out, and I'd like to see where we ended up at the end of the year, how those
We
decisions.
can definitely.
So we're gonna get some of that data starting to come to us already, as we look to next year from the parent survey. It'll start to be put into our board connection.
Yep.
So the curriculum committee got an
C9,
update
yeah.
so far, on the virtual survey for next school year. But as a follow-up, I think that's a great idea too.
Yep, I got a note right here. We do have those numbers.
Yeah, we could
The
definitely add
vast
that in.
majority of the virtuals are in the high school
Thank you.
still. But we'll have specific, that's a good point. And like Kevin alluded to, connected to that, we have already been surveying returning families about virtual in the future. So we have good data on that as well, and probably even have better numbers.
So far, 1,035 of the kids have been represented by the responses to the survey as of 2 days ago.
Right.
So that'll continue those numbers. And Brady and Julie mentioned their ongoing outreach in that area to parents.
To get to the other kids, the other families that have not filled that out.
Yeah, of current virtual.
But they haven't had to make decisions for next year yet.
They have been asked what their
They're
decisions
asking.
will be.
We have asked. Remember we sent out the survey, Matt?
Yeah.
We're doing a survey
So-
to see if we want.
Yeah, I'm just peppering you with it over there.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm
Okay.
gonna start responding
I
silly.
did right away.
So we have-
Have you
Oh, I
replied?
sure did.
I
Megan?
replied on the first
I
email.
did it right away.
We have 7
Amy?
kids right now
Good for you,
out of the
I
1,035 that
must
have
have
chosen.
because I didn't get any reminders.
Okay. Remember the
She's
rest of
one
us
of
have
the
to
ones
do
that
the
turnout
didn't
has been low so
reply.
far though, right?
No, I
No,
didn't
it's
get a
picked up.
response.
She
No,
gets,
it's
she
1,030,
replies in
it's
person.
over
She comes to
50%.
the
No,
meeting.
okay, I think last I looked was
What?
It was,
25,
yeah, it was
34.
like,
No, we
Yeah.
have really good results
Okay.
so far.
Yeah, we're over 1,000. And now what we're targeting is the 90. We went through yesterday. There's 93 kids that are currently virtual that have not responded to the survey. That's our target group because if you're
Oh,
in
and
person
another
right now and you didn't
900.
fill the survey out, we're going to make the assumption.
And another 900 who are currently in the buildings who haven't yet
Correct.
replied.
Correct.
But
But
they're
we're focusing on the 90.
Right.
Well,
Our
right,
outreach
because
to
the
those
assumption
is
is if they're in the buildings now, they'll be in the school in the fall.
Yes.
But depending on what that number, that could impact what we're willing to do as a district.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
we talked
that's what we
about that.
talked
It'll come
about.
back through
For
curriculum
sure.
probably next month.
That's what we talked about.
Yeah, with an update. Jessica, do you have anything for future agenda items?
Not at this time.
All right. Item 16, we're going to move into closed session. The board will convene into closed executive session pursuant to section 19.85, parent 1, parent C of the state statutes for the purpose of considering employment and compensation, and 1G for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel. Roll call, motion
I'll
please.
make a motion. I'll second it.
Motion by Gorman, second by Zebro. Roll call, please.
Barnes.
Aye.
Bauman.
Yes.
Gorman.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Hermaning.
Yes?
Kaiser.
yes.
Maple.
Yes.
Stankowski. Yes. Zebro.
Yes.
All yes.
7:45.
Thanks, Michelle.